find you, I find true. Never wanna find it like an watercolor blue. That's in my find you, I find true. It's in my veins when we're moving like the color blue. That's in my veins. Yeah, 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 yeah. It's in my veins that we're moving like the color blue. Like when I was grooving in my veins. Chapter 9. Flat Earth and Transformational Festivals. Why did Lightning in a Bottle issue a Flat Earth Retraction? And Symbiosis host a Satirical Flat Earth panel. While most people are getting their glow sticks, henna tattoos, and pseudo-pagan animal costumes ready for the next Transformational Festival, keep in mind that discussions on the shape of the Earth, at least at Lightning in a Bottle, LIB, in California, have been banned. So far as official panels go, back in 2016, the Do Lab put on the first and last official Flat Earth panel at LIB. It was a smashing success, featuring a phenomenal tirade by David Avocado Wolf, which can still be heard in full. Lightning in a Bottle is a hippy-dippy, countercultural festival where a lot of childish adults go to take drugs and think that they are enlightened. It can also be the front edge of the future present, in the sense that it does things like put on Flat Earth panels. LIB usually has a pretty banging musical lineup, and you may accidentally bump into a real shaman, though those are long odds. Countercultural festivals like LIB, with their roots tracing back to Woodstock for the older folk and Burning Man for the younger folk, have become an integral part of the socio-cultural, deconstructed lens that is neo-tribalism in a populist America. Now that's a lot of words, which basically means cultures gradually form niches, and LIB, Symbiosis, and a host of similarly styled festivals born out of Burning Man are a meeting or attraction point for just such a particular niche, namely the counterculture. One good thing about countercultural festivals is you can count on them to be countercultural. You won't see advertisements for Pepsi, but you may see them for like Invo coconut water. But hey, they'll probably offer you a free sample. However, the root of counterculture has also been the ideational freedom to question many things, even everything. Well, everything except the shape of the world as far as LIB is concerned anymore. Riddle me this. Why does Lightning in a Bottle host a Flat Earth panel, then post a retraction a few months later on their website with a photo of the blue marble, courtesy of NASA? Let's find out. Do Lab Directing of Marketing Jesse Shannon writes a public apology on behalf of Lightning in a Bottle beneath a picture of the globe in 2016. Shannon, aka Y2, notes, quote, "Conspiracy theories have been around long before LIB, and they will always be a part of countercultural movements. We are not interested in challenging every conspiracy theory or policing all the out there ideas that a community of festival goers may consider and debate. But there are limits, and the vast number of great thinkers, organizations, and regular people that this particular conspiracy implicates defies credulity. The idea that everyone from NASA and every other country's space program, to the weatherman, to every international airline pilot, to universities, to governments, the list goes on, is part of a vast conspiracy about the shape of the planet is ludicrous." End quote. All right. So that's the main argument. How could everybody be in on it? This idea that flat Earth is too big to hide is probably the best argument against it. But when you start to unpack it on a top-down, only on a need-to-know basis, it becomes far more plausible. One, pilots and weathermen don't need to know. I've talked to the former, pilots, and listened to the latter, weathermen, and they don't need to know. So they're out, period. For example, one pilot I talked to, I mentioned, why don't you dip your nose down for the curve when you're going 500 miles an hour over hundreds of miles of Earth? He hadn't even thought of it before. So there's cognitive dissonance in most pilots. They're not on the level. They're non-player characters. Thank God they know how to fly. So they're out. And then the weathermen, forget about it. They're just, think of Tom Coons. What you're seeing here is a mirage. So the non-player characters. So they're out. Two, not everybody at universities needs to know either. For the most part, academic life is fairly closed off and silo-esque. That is to say, one department isn't talking to the other department. It's like silo syndrome, okay? So departments don't really talk to one another. So people in the English department aren't on the up and up with the engineering department. And within the engineering department, they're not talking to the astronomy department. So the students need not know, because they're just, gobbling up information that's being jammed down their throats so they can regurgitate it on the next quantitative exam and pay more money to do that. That's why it's called an education, and you pay your tuition because you're not using your intuition, side note. And astronomy and engineering students aren't in the field, so to speak. Same with archaeology students. It's like maybe you do one dig, in Guatemala or something like that. But they're not, by and large, they're just in a cloistered classroom. Same with engineering students. Maybe you exhibit, one site where they're building a train track or laying a foundation. Same with astronomy. Maybe you go one time to the observatory, right? And you look at some stars through a telescope. So, but other than those very small scenarios of being in the field, they're just basically cloistered little lemmings sitting in boxes, listening to teachers tell them what to think. So that leaves the professors, right? So depending on their area of study and background, the engineering department doesn't really need to know about the shape of the Earth. They calculate it as flat over distances pertaining to their constructions, and anything beyond their bridges, well, that's for, the astronomy department, or that's for the study, the deeper study of geodesy. It doesn't pertain to the functional realm of being an engineer. And so, a lot of people do engineering because it's a very profitable way to make a living. But they're not calculating for the curvature of the Earth when they do engineering projects. And incidentally, I've spoken with engineers and they've confirmed this. Even though that their textbooks say that if they were to build something over such and such a distance, they would account for the curve, they're not doing it on site. Ask any engineer on site. Everything's level, treated as level, with respect to the curvature of the Earth, not the topology of the land, which could be bumpy or whatever. So that leaves the astronomy department. So within that department, some faculty could know about a certain amount of deception, right? Like that astronomy professor I had that worked on the Hubble Space Telescope. Like, he maybe knew what was going on, maybe not. But to what degree is probably varied, and it would definitely be on a need-to-know basis. So for example, as I just mentioned, my astronomy professor worked on constructing and designing the Hubble Space Telescope, and it doesn't even seem having done both of those elements would necessitate knowing the object may not in fact be performing in space. So the telescope does not provide a visual feed of its view, but rather it's a complex set of information that is extrapolated into imagery via this informational data. So he could have been very good at the language of the data sets and how to compile them, but that wouldn't necessarily mean that he was aware that the data sets that were coming back weren't necessarily images of deep space. Make sense? I hope so. So even astronomy professors could be out, and that leaves anthropology, which I think is, probably the best argument for universities. And I guess, given the elasticity of carbon dating and the absence of a genetic link, the problems with Lucy, or another way to put that is the presence of a missing link between species, interspecies adaptations. It indicates that Darwinian evolution, as currently understood, is still inconclusive, okay? There's no indication that we farted our way from fish to Mozart or that apes became humans. There's not even evolution. There's not even evidence that pigeons could become eagles. So we're not seeing an argument for evolution in that way. But I'll tell you right now, my archaeology professor, my freshman year of college, he believed it. He wasn't perpetrating a lie. He was a non-player character that did his doc and postdoc research as a believer in evolution who's looking for the missing link. And God bless him for it. But they haven't found it, and they can't prove it. And, the whole thing with carbon dating is largely inconclusive. One, it's highly inaccurate. You can carbon date living things that'll say they're hundreds of thousands of years old. And two, if you don't know when it started, you can't calculate how long the decay has occurred. A very simple way of saying that is if you go into a room and see a candle burning, you don't know when the candle started burning, right? And that's similar to how carbon dating operates. And then generally speaking, this is about the evolutionary side. This is not even inherently a flat Earth position. But they go part and parcel, okay? So evolution is still missing conclusive proof. It's more likely that evolution as we perceived it was not interspecial, but the development of each species in some sort of Lamarckian, which is to say epigenetic and genetic, induced progression. See Case of the Midwife Toad by Arthur Kessler. So anthropology comes up shy. Mathematics is all theoretical, comes up shy in relation to proving the main heliocentric globe narrative, which I think is very much tethered to evolution and this idea that you weren't made by a creator. Okay, that's how that plays. All right, so mathematics is all theoretical. No thing is a number, right? So there's no trouble there. They're just numbers, number people doing number things. Go figure that out. So the closest department past archaeology with the evolutionary condition is probably humanities and history, and depending on the professor, right? So peer-reviewed scientism discoveries in a double-blind lab yield the equivalent, or basically the equivalent of someone stuffing their index fingers in both ears and reciting the mantra, I'm not here, I'm not here, I'm not here. Which is basically to say that the observer affects the observation, at least to some degree. And so this doesn't mean that testing can't prove elements of reality, because I think that peer-reviewed testing and double-blind experiments can be helpful because they weed out conditions that could affect the outcome, even if they can't weed them all out. But it does mean that you cannot trap the essence of change or the essence of mutability. So the reason I'm saying humanities and history is close is that you get humanities professors and they're studying mythology and they're studying ancient worldviews, right? And then you got history, and depending on the professor, they may or may not be studying alternate views of history, or they're very aware that history is written by the victor, right? So they're looking from Greece to Rome to Western Empire to, to Wall Street, and they're aware of histories written by the victor. So I think that you're going to get closer to the truth in those departments. Again, it's a professor by professor scenario, and some of those people might actually know the Earth is flat or believe it to be. But basically, so by and large, the university is out, right? So next up is governmental agencies. So nothing on the civil side is relevant. So, the people at the DMV aren't in on it. But intelligence and naval divisions would be on a need-to-know basis. So they have obviously segmented top-down disclosure-based information. And only at the highest echelons would intelligence and naval-based divisions need to know. And, plain sailing navigation, they treat 600 nautical miles as flat. So the navigators of ships are, they're aware that they're treating 600 nautical miles as flat. Now, they're operating under the same NPC cognitive dissonance that pilots are. They're not thinking the Earth is flat, unless they just gradually keep using their eyes and wake up. And I would argue some of those naval captains would know that. But NPC cognitive dissonance, and then they're on a need-to-know basis, right? So, but among those divisions within naval and intelligence agencies, only the operative top-down positions whom needed to know for strategic advantage, which would be very selective, and tactical excellence. So Buck Rogers, which is my name for some NPC, who joined the Navy, doesn't know shit. We also know some people were hiding some secrets. So why not them and this? And then last on the list is like NASA and every other, country's space program. RASA, JAXA, ESA. Well, I can tell you right now, all the cogs running around at SpaceX cheering for the launch like a bunch of programmed Incobots don't fucking know the Earth is flat, all right? They got nothing, they have no clue. The director of NASA, you bet your ass he knows. okay? As well as any other head of any other space agency in the great wide world. So from there down, you could probably limit it to 5 to 10 people, tops, plus the astronauts that have to be part of the acting, okay? So administratively, 10 people in each agency, plus the actronauts. That's not a lot of people. We're talking about less than 100 people. And then you have your intelligence agencies and the top downs that need to know there, maybe 5 to 10. Less than 200 people on the planet. Arguably, every intelligence agency at all the countries, I don't even know if they would all know. But presuming that a lot of them did, you could still push it up 300, 400 people. It's not a lot. So it's only whom needed to understand that element to engage tactically the expression of the entity's purported capability, i.e. the astronauts, and no more. The simple version of this is people looking at screens of data who have never been to Jupiter don't know if, quote, the discovery of both cosmic inflation and gravitational waves at the BICEP-2 experiment in Antarctica and the supposed discovery of superluminal neutrinos at the Swiss-Italian border have now been retracted. They don't know that, as noted by William A. Wilson in his article on the regression of science. And whether the brooding cult of scientism led by dress-up cult leaders Bill Nye and Neil deGrasse Tyson is in fact an expression of their inherent belief of the world or foisted upon them like a kettle of sheep. So moreover, these select few people would be sworn into silence, oaths, against the risk of great personal and personally related harm, probably, and God forbid, but probably to their loved ones. You know, that's what oaths do. They bind you by levels of adverse results. That's why the Bible says, swear not on heaven, on earth. You know, let your yes be a yes and your no be a no. Don't bind yourself by any oaths. And if you ever want to get out of jury duty, which I recommend doing, not getting out of, the judge has to ask you if anyone wants to leave for religious reasons. And all you have to do is quote that Bible verse. The Bible says, judge not lest ye be judged. And I don't want to be judged, so I won't judge. And then if you're ever asked to swear on the Bible as testimony, just quote that Bible verse and say, I will swear not by this Bible under heaven or earth. My yes is a yes and my no is a no. And if they won't, and then they have to accept you or they won't accept you, but at least you'll preserve your integrity. Side note. All right, so these dress-up cult leaders, Bill Nye and Neil deGrasse Tyson, is in fact an expression of their inherent belief of the world or foisted upon them like a kettle of sheep. Moreover, these select few people would be sworn into silence against risk of great personal and personally related harm and cycled through as necessary. What's great about Flat Earth is it does not bend to this agreement. We've discovered it ourselves. The space agencies are the new gold rush, and Flat Earth is the restless natives, okay? Every spacehead from here to Timbuktu is trying to ejaculate an obelisk out of low Earth orbit. Great tax benefits and PR, stands for public relations. Meanwhile, more and more people are uncovering the truth about Flat Earth. The natives are restless. Scientism is circling the wagons. So allow me to continue, Monsignor. Flat Earthers don't contend that everyone is in on it. As mentioned, it's quite feasible that the majority of the employees at space organizations are unaware they are perpetrating a deception. Of course, this is unavoidable for astronauts who have been to space, quote unquote. But when we look at their behavior, such as Apollo 11 astronauts Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins, when they've just returned from landing on the moon, they appear as schoolboys who just got detention. Their bodies fidgety, their glances askew, their voice timbres penitent and calculated, like they're struggling not to say anything untrue. See Chapter 5 if you skipped ahead. All of these elements, in particular, the slow, calculated, and clandestine-sounding language, suggest the opposite of what would naturally be expected for three American heroes who've just returned from the greatest odyssey ever known to man. So the deal with this public retraction is that LIB put on a great Flat Earth panel, and it made a big impact. The organizers got complaints, which in turn most likely spooked the sponsors, which in turn prompted this public retraction. So on the inside, the woman behind the LIB Flat Earth panel was removed from her position as founder of the Do Lab and underhandedly edged out of the very company she had begun. There's no reason to unveil this backstory further out of respect for her and her future endeavors. But suffice it to say, the person behind the panel gets ousted and LIB sets an unprecedented no Flat Earth precedent. Now, with that backstory, let's look at more of Y2's arguments beyond It's too big to be real. The first point Jesse Shannon makes is understandable. It's the one a lot of globies make before they've done any research, and he stated it like this. The Earth is a sphere-like object in orbit around the Sun. If you move in a straight line on the surface of the Earth for long enough distance, about 25,000 miles, you will eventually end up in the same location you started. This has been scientifically confirmed through not only countless experiments, but the daily functioning of the global economy, end quote. Okay, for starters, referring to countless experiments but not citing one is a fool's trick. Secondly, flat earthers do not debate that due east-west circumnavigation of the planet is possible, as this can occur on either model. We state that no due north-south circumnavigation of the planet has ever occurred, a feat that should be possible on a sphere Earth, but which has not occurred. Moreover, as to how the daily global economy affects the shape of the Earth beyond having used the word global is beyond me. If you had extrapolated, I may have formed a better retort, Mr. Shannon. Secondly, it's important to note that Jesse Shannon does not even mention the main point made by the FE keynote speaker David Wolf, namely, quote, observations that can't be made on a 25,000 mile circumference ball Earth, end quote. D. Wolf points out that 70 miles is about 1 degree of the Earth's curvature of a 360-degree circle, the distance around the equator, and that 1 degree of curvature should yield, mathematically speaking, a little over 3,266 feet of curve. Observe the spherical trigonometry-based curvature chart designed in AutoCAD here. I'll leave a link in the description. But just so you don't have to take a flat earther's word for it, according to Franklin Institute's chief astronomer Derek Pitts, whom is referenced in this article, the Earth's curvature is 8 inches per mile squared. Okay? So another way to say this is c equals 2/3 times x squared, where c is the curvature in feet and x is the distance in miles. Pitts references this site and this site, links in description, from the math department at the University of Regina to confirm his point. All right, so that's coming out of them. All right, that's not some flat earthers like rant at a neo-pagan festival. So anyway, notably, Neil deGrasse Tyson didn't even know the calculation for the curvature of the Earth. That's just funny. I'll leave a link to that. A bit of an oversight for the point man on debunking flat Earth, don't you think? So now Wolf lives in Hawaii on the island of Kauai. Oahu is 70 miles away from Kauai, from shoreline to shoreline, which reads sea level to sea level, right? No altitude. No elevation. Oahu's highest mountain is Mount Ka'ala, clocking in at 4,025 feet. But what that means is you shouldn't see the bottom part of the mountain, right? So there should be, and then Wolf says, but you don't see that. You can see it all the way down to the shore. So it's 70 miles away. Oahu is 70 miles away from Kauai, from shoreline to shoreline, right? So Oahu's highest mountain is Mount Ka'ala, clocking in at 4,025 feet. Now, we know that 70 miles produces 3,266 feet of curve, okay? So, but David Wolf says on a clear day, you can stand on the shores of Kauai, look past over 3,000 feet of curvature, observe the peak of the mountain, and the others around it, and follow with your eye line all the way down to the shore. Now, if 70 miles away, there should be 3,000 feet of curvature. You should not be able to see from the top to the bottom of a 4,000-foot mountain. It makes no sense. So that means Wolf notes, you don't see that. You can see all the way down to the shore. So the point here isn't whether Wolf has discovered a sphere-Earth anomaly just in one place, which he has, or whether, for example, like Joshua Nowicki's famous time-lapse video and photo of the Chicago city skyline across Lake Michigan, which was like over 58 feet and, should have blocked the majority of the city skyline, but you could see most of the city skyline, particularly Willis Tower, from the top down to the bottom. But the main point here is that this flat earth retraction from LIB, it doesn't touch on any of these scientific points that Wolf made, but instead relies on attacking the ambiguously wide flat earth theory from a safe distance, and with a high-pressured, vaguely focused fire hose. The notion that the flat earth is too big to cover up is probably the best pro-sphere argument that can be conjured, and that's why I covered it as in depth and with as much integrity as I could muster. The contention that we are observing multiple instances across this earth which do not reveal the amount of curvature that they should, given the measurements of the globe that have been given to us and the curvature measurements that have been given to us, is the flat earthers' silver bullet. It's the best argument. It's mathematical, it uses their language, it uses their measurement tactics, and it proves inconsistencies. And that's all you have to do is just chink, 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 chink. Just keep putting chinks in the armor until eventually you'll see that the emperor's wearing no clothes. So that's why Mr. Wolf was discussing empirical observations and mathematical calculations, neither of which is contingent upon claiming that every scientist lies or all the space programs are in on it. So do you see how Shannon's tactic of zooming out moves the argument without proper consideration for the debate and the particular points of evidence that already have been submitted? We have evidence. As far as we know, the Earth is optically level. Over these given distances, there has been no observation of curvature. And then in Jesse Shannon's defense, he also writes, quote, if the Flat Earth panel had been conducted as a debate, if there were people on the panel that offered a dissenting opinion so that a real dialogue about this issue could have occurred as we had hoped, that would have been acceptable, end quote. But despite this claim, something tells me the Do Lab isn't going to be sponsoring any Flat Earth versus Globe Earth debates anytime soon. And as Jesse conceded, these are happening whether or not LIB participates in facilitating it. So, quote, the fact is that this conversation is going on in some areas of the community with or without it being present at LIB, end quote. The primary issue with Flat Earth censorship at transformational festivals is that it shows how the alleged countercultural edge is just the edge of Antarctica that nobody is allowed to ideate past. If we cannot depend on our scantily clad and heavily dosed counterculture to think outside the box, aka ahead of the curve, then where might we expect it to come from? Gap employees? Clerks at JCPenney? The inebriated proletariat? Moreover, deliberate satire designed to ridicule and not entertain, such as in the subsequent 2016 Flat Earth charade at Symbiosis Festival, have set an underwhelming precedent of the level of retardation Flat Earthers are being painted up as operating on. Gosh, this next one kills me to cover. We're going to nail it. So what happened at Symbiosis? Well, in the wake of LIB, Symbiosis, another countercultural festival, decided to host its own panel. However, this one was a deliberate anti-Flat Earth and treated the issue as satire for purposes of ridicule. The panel kicks off with a planted pilot, whom is noticeably drunk and slurring his words, saying, I'm a licensed pilot and I've flown around this planet, end quote, while he gesticulates with a can of brew. Then it goes on to a showcased contractor and principal investigator for NASA from 2000 to 2009, check the links in the description, his LinkedIn, named Bruce Damer, who showed up in a lab coat to equate flat earthers with people who believe in a pancake and are on an acid trip that results in meeting Keith Richards, who, by the way, is the cultural epitome of drugged out incoherence, immortalized in that bit by Robin Williams, in which he impersonated Richards smoking a joint with a roach in a post-nuclear winter state where they were the last two beings left on Earth. Richards says to the roach after a long toke upon a joint, you know, I smoked your mother, end quote. And then they also used Kumari, the fake guru, who made an entire Netflix movie based on him pretending to be a guru from India, turning unwitting Americans into spiritual devotees, quote unquote, and Sanskrit into spaghetti mantras. Not to mention J.P. Sears, whom, though the most docile and even-handed on the matter, nonetheless operates as a false spiritual life coach, and whom directs his intelligent wit towards taking the piss out of Flat Earth as well. And then to top it off, we got two Tesla clowns who show up sounding overemployed and undeservedly haughty and super snarky. Snarky means they think their sarcasm makes them sound smart and witty, but it actually just comes across as aggressive and petty. So these two goons, whom mentioned they worked for Elon Musk and that he was the official sponsor of this entire panel, told people in the audience that they were hanging out with Elon Musk during Summit at Sea and that they came across the fucking edge of the earth, goddammit, end quote. Then they went on to say that they got David Wolf on their advisory board and held a picture of him up, and that he's, quote, super sacred as fuck, end quote. Now, as the reader, you know what David Wolf did at LIB, and you can begin to see the context around why they are trying to make him look retarded. So they also claim to have raised, with Wolf on their advisory board, $10 million in Series E funding, and that they were offering the first ever, quote, tour to the edge of the earth, end quote. That it was, quote, Uber for the edge of the earth, end quote. And that they were, quote, booked out till 2021, and that they have a, quote, whole fleet of Tesla yachts, but, quote, since we did all that funding, they are proud to announce they are Symbiosis' first official sponsor, and all you have to do is text us Flat Earth, all lowercase one word, to 94253 because seeing is believing, end quote. Then they added, all you got to do is leave your mind behind and we'll take you to the edge, end quote. So basically these two SpaceX shills were calling data on flat earthers whom were naive enough to believe they could win tickets to the edge of the earth or just thought it was a funny joke, and that Elon Musk, NASA fanboy, privatization of space government subsidized life raft would take them there. See Chapter 10. They have a website. The Flat Earth panels went from genuine investigation at LIB 2016 to controlled demolition at Symbiosis 2016. The incentives for mitigating the dissemination of flat Earth thinking are very real. Because how do you think the various space agencies of the world, namely US, Russia, India, China, Japan, etc., would react to no longer being able to charge a shit ton of tax money for Photoshop work that could very well be done nowadays on Fiverr? End of Chapter 9.
On the seeds of my open shores to be pages in the dreams of XYD2 Alpha Mega. One is on to tune it to, but what to tune it to, but what you tuning to, tuning to, tuning to. Ole ole light, ole ole light.
Chapter 10. Flat Earth and SpaceX. Musk's Fake X, Privatizing Interplanetary Deception.